Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the overall investment climate in Pakistan, the kind of opportunities those exist in Pakistan, what sort of areas are lucrative for doing business, and not only for the international investment opportunities. We are also talking about the domestic local investors from Pakistan, because whenever we end up having a chat with them, we realize that there are a lot of problems, a lot of hindrances, a lot of red areas, I would say, so they create a lot of problem. Now, on the other hand, when you talk about the perspective from the government, I mean, they say that we have provided them a one-window operation, and there is this ideal way to make sure that you don't have to go through any long or lengthy procedure. We just try to eliminate that, and we tried, and it worked really well. Now, still we haven't been able to fetch that kind of investment that we could have done. Obviously, as far as competitors are concerned, we have India, we have Sri Lanka, we have Bangladesh. But having said that, Pakistan being one of the top countries as far as the export of cotton products was concerned, I think we still we have a long way to go, because the way the market share has been captured by the Turkish companies, by the Bangladeshi companies, by the Lankan companies, I'm talking about the regional now, India or perhaps Vietnam, it's unbelievable. Where do we stand at the moment as far as productivity is concerned, or as far as the overall quality of management, which we call TQM, total quality management, is concerned? Are we competitive enough? Why aren't we looking into the new virgin markets? That has been the case ever since I've been in this particular field of covering business stories, but nothing has been done. We were always told Pakistan is a rich country, but the moment you talk to any average person, he has got issues and he's got some very legitimate concerns. Why? That is perhaps the major question which we'll be answering in our today's program. Let me quickly introduce you to our panelists. We have with us on my right is SARDAR YASIR Khan Saab, former president of Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry. SARDAR Saab, thank you so much, and pleasure to have you on the show. Likewise. Sir. And we have with us ZAFAR Durrani Saab, President REENERGIA. Sir, am I right?
Durrani and REENERGIA.
REENERGIA. Yeah. REENERGIA World Bank. Thank you so much, Durrani Saab, for your presence as well. And we also have with us on Skype Dr. KHAQAN NAJEEB Saab, who is the former advisor, Ministry of Finance, and a senior economist. A pleasure to have you, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. KHAQAN, for your time as well. Now, let me start off from you, SARDAR Saab. Now, talking about the current situation, I mean, this is not the first government that is claiming that we have provided the ideal business opportunities and we have been able to create that conducive environment where investment is going to just pour in. The same government used to say that people would be coming in from the foreign countries and they'll be looking for jobs here in Pakistan. But sir, looking at the current scenario, I mean, just talking about the last night, somebody sent me a very interesting meme saying petrol prices increased by another 8 rupees plus, somewhere around 146 rupees, and sugar price that used to be much under 80 rupees of maybe a year ago or something has now crossed 150. I'm just showing you because the concern of a normal average person is not about how much money is pouring into the system, what sort of job creation is taking place. People are basically concerned in general, if you talk, it's about inflation. Now, sir, but that is a separate chapter altogether. But talking about the investment opportunities, sir, especially in the productive sector, for job opportunities and for better earnings, I would say, sir. You take.
Look, I think there's a number of things to look at. First and foremost, we need to understand that this has been going on for a number of years, not just now. And with the promises that were made by PTI government, naturally everybody had very high hopes and very high expectations. And now we're trying to ask them, where are those dreams that you showed us? And they're trying to make them, to reality. Now, give me an example. If you look at 2018 when they took power, you were looking at the current account deficit being close to about 19 billion, and that's gone all the way down to 1.8 billion. That's a significant decrease because of their policies. At the same time, if you look at the foreign exchange reserves in 2018, they were about 18 billion or 17 billion. They've gone all the way up to about 27 billion. So we are moving in the right direction. The problem is we're moving very slowly. We should be a lot more faster. If you're looking at the Prime Minister's vision, he's always said a few things. He said, I'm trying to focus on employment creation, for the youth because we're abundant in terms of our numbers. 35%, 35 years is the average. We're looking at 55% of the population. At the same time, he said we need to create wealth generation because the economy is going to boom when we make money, the businesses make money, and also enhancing exports. That's been one of the biggest dilemmas with Pakistan, considering the scale and size of the country. We should be achieving at least $200 billion in terms of our exports annually. 100 billion in agriculture alone. We talked about IT, we talked about pharma, we talked about textiles. We're not able to touch that. There's a number of reasons. Primarily, it's to do with policy again. The other issue is Prime Minister's vision is not trickling down because of the bureaucratic system that we have in Pakistan. There's a lot of red tapeism. And again, the biggest problem that all businesses face is the tax system in Pakistan, which they've now finally realized is the core issue behind not being able to progress. And this is why they've said that we're now going to introduce a single sales tax policy portal, which is what's required. Because if you look at exactly what's happening right now, there's about 6 different ways of doing it. And now they realize, no, let's just make it one way. And if you also look at the types of taxation, I've said time and time again, we have about 70 different types of taxes, already overly complicated. I mean, amongst the rest of the world, we're probably one of the top 5 complicated tax systems in the world. And that doesn't work for businesses like ours, where we have investments elsewhere, or we have exposure from world markets, and we realize that the world is so much smoother, so much easier. Why have we made it so difficult in Pakistan? So
that's a million-dollar question.
Another main issue has been not having the right man for the right job at the right place. So if you look at the departments, we have people sitting there who have nothing to do with them, or have no exposure, no know-how, and they're making policy or trying to make policy, which is not conducive. And I've always said this, unless and until we're all on the same page, this one window essence will only be implemented if people like me or people like him are going to be sitting across the table from us at our wavelength, are able to understand exactly where we're coming from. Only then can we progress and move forward.
Now, Durrani Saab, one important point which gentleman just highlighted was about the same wavelength. Unfortunately, whenever you go to any public sector department, sir, number one, the person is not available. Number two, if he is available, instead of facilitating you, the person is going to create a lot of hindrances for odd reasons. And we know what the odd reasons are. Perhaps what it does is that either the investor runs away, or he has to give some sort of a bribe. He has to bribe people, and maybe a foreigner would not like that. So, sir, he has got multiple opportunities and options then. He can go to Sri Lanka, he can go to Bangladesh, he can go to so many other regional countries, sir, where the rate of return would be better, where the productivity is going to be better, and he would psychologically feel that his investment is safe. Because as long as that perception for the investment, that is also very important. No matter what you do, as long as this perception exists, people would be pretty, reluctant to come in and even visit and see places of investments, for that matter. Sir, your take?
Yeah, Faisal, thank you. So, I mean, just continuing from SARDAR, I think the important thing, and for me the barometer of investment and openness of an economy is the local investor investing in his or her own country. That is a fundamental barometer on which Pakistan fails by measures which I don't even want to start counting. Now, why is that? You see, so let's focus on that. So, because I think that will address your question of governance and everything. So I think within that, why do I say it is the internal barometer? Because to be very honest, even if it was not the barometer, given the fiscal situation in Pakistan, given the amount that we have to watch every dollar that outflows because of our weak export sector, our inability to create the currency of trade, i.e. the US dollar, I think the important thing is investment locally is PKR driven, so it must be a priority. So I would say stop looking at China, Bangladesh, India. First start looking at what is the Pakistani investor doing. Now, once you start looking at that, obviously people will say a Pakistani investor will also need US dollars for intermediate goods and services. The answer is yes, they will, but it will be far less, and the profits will be less likely to be repatriated than in the case of a foreign investor.
Correct.
So the remaining dollars that you have to risk hedge against your currency are less. Now let's get into very quickly the 2 factors. So the first factor is how do you bring in the local investor, right? So first thing is how competitive are your local markets? Now if you start looking at it, and I was just making a few notes as you were talking, in everything from transport to food to defense supplies to real estate to core industry, manufacturing cans, for example, or bottles for bottling, you have a SOE in there, a state-owned enterprise. So the state is competing with its own citizens in the local market. That is one aspect, which is the provision side. Look at the supply side, or the demand side, sorry, where you actually look at the state actually controlling then market prices. The state has no business to be controlling market
They
prices.
shouldn't be intervening. Yeah?
They should not be. No, I'm not. I'm saying interventionism is something else. But state playing in markets on both sides.
So for example, when the government comes in and says that you reduce the prices of wheat or reduce the prices of sugar, what is that supposed to mean then?
No, the government's job is that if it wants to say that, the government should flood the market with sugar at its own prices. It has the right to do that. So, which is the relief package, right, for example.
Yeah.
But it has no right to come to my shop and say you sell sugar at 60 or 10 or 110 rupees. That is not the job of the government. The government has to lead by action and by regulation. Regulation, the way the government thinks is like the British Raj. And it is not PTI government's fault, it is not PPP government's fault, it is not PMLN. It's the bureaucracy of Pakistan, which is an extractive British Raj bureaucracy that has not been trained to understand that there are other tools available to a government regulator, a government manager. And let me finish by saying on the governance side, you know, there are two governance factors that every investor looks at. In addition to an open market, they will say, what is the country governance? Country governance is security and justice. How stable is the country in terms of keeping its citizens' life secure? Second part, it looks at local governance. At the UC level, at the provincial level, the
Very
permits,
grassroots level.
yeah, absolutely, the permits I need, the services I need, again, the legal, the security and justice, local police level that I need, my ability to go to court and come out of it rapidly.
It's kind of an index.
And the tax, it's the index. And you know, this is where we are falling short.
But is it like quick comments, sir? You know, whenever we get these indexes, for example, the World Economic Forum is one huge, I mean, I would say organization that releases these indexes. So we get to know that, you know, as far as women education is concerned, Pakistan stands at number XYZ out of ABC. So now, sir, normally whenever you look at Pakistan, honestly speaking, we, in fact, other than the population, rest is all over 100, unfortunately. So that is where the reality is, that is where the perception is, and you know, perception is stronger than reality at times, sir.
If I may just add there, I think one of the things you have touched upon, and I just want to quickly tell the viewers, that we are now doing, thanks to BOI, a business enabling environment index for Pakistan. Because we know what global indices do. We have just seen how the world benchmark index, I don't want to name it on TV, has been shot down by the World Bank itself. So it was shown to be corrupt, it was shown that people were actually manipulating these indices. So I have no faith, never had faith in these indices. I would rather have a local index. Which
So this is going to be a domestic market research
Yes, very much. It's called the
document.
Business Enabling Environment Index for Pakistan. It's being done by ourselves, REENERGIA, as well as with
REENERGIA, okay.
and Ipsos Reuters. They are the survey firm. And it's being done with Chemonics, with a little bit of US funding, a little bit of government blessing.
Okay.
But we are hoping to have that ready by
But this is
Jan.
going to be really productive for the
Absolutely.
entire
It's a local
system.
index, benchmarking local.
All right. I'll just get back to you, sir. Let me also engage our friend Dr. KHAQAN Hassan Najeeb Sahab. Dr. Sahab, first of all, sir, a very important point that was raised regarding investment, that you need to make sure that your local, domestic, indigenous investor is safe, he's happy, he has that kind of trust on the government, and on top, another very important factor is about the stability of the government, that is about the overall law and order situation, and obviously I would also add one more point, that is about the energy and cost-effective energy, sir. Now, looking at all these, parameters, sir, it seems that things are not that great when compared with the regional countries, and we are asking the foreign investor to come in and invest in Pakistan, sir. So, where is the missing link?
Faisal, thank you for having me on the show. So just to understand most easily, Pakistan's investment to GDP ratio has stood around 15% of GDP for quite some time. That means that countries which have grown, like in East Asia or even in our neighboring countries, have shown a investment to GDP ratio of about 30%. The reason they don't get into current account crisis, one of the reasons at least, is that they are able to muster domestic savings and domestic investment, so they don't have to borrow from abroad. It is a key issue which you're highlighting. Now, I think we look at a lot of things which are manifestations, these indices, these performance criterias are manifestations of what is going on fundamentally in the economy. I think a good place to start for Pakistan is to really believe that we want to create a well regulated market economy. We want to let the markets work across the board. We don't have an energy market. As a country, we have not been able to create one. Because we don't have an energy market, the competitive behavior to create competitive prices is not there. The efficiency remains low because the footprint of the state remains high. We don't complain about the telephone prices in Pakistan because we have a competitive private sector working. We have some kind of regulation, and we are finding some price efficiency and price discovery there. Agriculture is largely the same story. Wheat and sugarcane, the state is setting prices, so price discovery is not there, competitiveness is not there, and overall agriculture productivity also stays low. So I think a good place for Pakistan to start a strong reform effort, besides doing regulatory modernization, which we have been doing for some time, which we have reinvigorated in 2019. We have done away with some of the regulations which have reduced cost and time, but is to really, as a nation, agree that privatization or divestment, whether that's listing on the stock exchanges, whether that's management control, we have to agree as a nation that we have to create markets across the board. Let the state be the regulator and let the executive be the policy maker. As a country, if we don't agree, one of the reasons the state cannot effectively do policy making, or the government, any government that may be, because so much of their time goes into firefighting of the operations in terms of the state-owned enterprises we run. So I think that would be a real good place to start. It will also help in helping get a financial viability in terms of the monies that can come in, and especially the efficiency aspect, saving of the cost and time we spend in running these assets. We have about 203 SOEs, 85 of them are crucial, top 20, 30 in the energy sector, in the aviation sector, the railways, all need to be thought of in a different time frame. The energy as a whole needs a completely different ambiance. We need to reconfigure the energy sector from privatization to creating a multi-buyer, multi-seller market in Pakistan. We have to really think again. In agriculture, Pakistan was a great beneficiary of the green revolution. The second revolution that came through was the gene revolution. We largely missed, and that's why where we stand today, in terms of productivity, we are half of the nations that are doing the yields as best in the world. Let me repeat that for the viewers. Our productivity, our yields are not even half in the main crops. And that is why you are not able to have enough crops in the country. You have to import, and thus reliance on inflation from the world. So you have to start thinking about what is going on in the world today is the precision agriculture revolution. I think these are some of the things we have to start thinking about.
We did not change with time. Very, very interesting, I would say, arguments from Dr. Saab. But sir, I'll get back to agriculture, but one area that is, I really want you to throw light on, is about that the interest rates in Pakistan, sir. Even during the COVID times, I remember it was around 0%. In USA, if I'm not wrong, it was about 0.25% in UK. Ours was initially around 14%, and then they brought it down slowly. Don't you think, sir, the interest rate, in order to make sure that the money is available for the local investors, sir, that is one area where there is a lot of problem, because it's, if you're looking at that kind of an interest rate and you have to return that money back, you have to see the ROR, you have to see so many other factors involved, which should be constant. For example, dollar, for example, oil prices, for example, the cost of doing business, energy is another important factor, and the input cost, whether it's the fixed cost or it's the variable cost. So when there are so many, uncertainties that prevail in the system, sir, how can I, foresee or forecast?
I think we're so badly, in a way, living in a bubble. If you look at what's happening with regards to IMF, is the regulations. We're not able to think beyond boundaries simply because we keep saying what's IMF dictating to Pakistan. Ideally, the interest rate should have been close to about 3%, 4%. Max. And that's when I compare with the world rates. Even currently, if you look at commercial rates, lending rates.
And considering the current inflation also.
We're looking at 11,
that
12%.
is, the government says it's 9.2%.
Officially, that's
but it's in
saying.
double digits.
Unofficially, I'm telling you it's about 11, 12%. Now, the dilemma is, if you look at the US right now, they're offering commercial rates at about 4% net for someone like me who wants to go and do a commercial property. In Pakistan, they're saying 7.5%, but if you add KHAQAN, it goes to 10%. It's not viable. For any project of any sort, whether you're doing an apartment or building a restaurant, hotel, anything, it's just too much money to be paying back. And the dilemma is that the government is the biggest client for all of these banks. So they've never had to focus on consumer banking. It's always been the government that you've lended to. And the government, on the other hand, is again saying, I'm sorry, we cannot go lower than 7.5% because IMF doesn't allow us to. So in order to become long-term sustainable economic development is primarily based on these fundamental policies, which is again to do with how you are going to make a conducive environment for business to invest and get lending.
So as far as your monetary policy is concerned, what sort of influence do you think IMF has on it?
IMF has every influence you can ask for. IMF is dictating your petrol prices. IMF is
even if you make
taxes.
State Bank of Pakistan totally autonomous?
You can't. They actually want to have control over your state bank. I mean, they want the state bank government to report to them, and that's not viable for people like us in Pakistan, for them to be pulling our strings. I'll tell you something else. The Prime Minister wants to allow a lot of credit for, lending to SMEs, and SMEs are supposed to be 7% of your backbone of the country. That's not going to happen if IMF is going to dictate what interest rate they should be charging. If IMF is going to dictate what your tax collection target should be for each year. If FBR is again going to scrutinize and ask us to pay the enhanced tax as opposed to enhancing the tax base, which is not what's happening. I mean, they've increased it, but it's very marginal compared to the scale. We're still looking at about what, 4% taxpayers, 5% taxpayers?
Oh, less than that.
We should be going close to about 20, 30% if we're actually allowing, to go with the VBOC model. If you're saying you're going to introduce single tax, there's a lot of things to be done. But it's about taking us on board and asking us whether this is can you implement this? Can you execute this? Can you actually allow this to be accepted by all the average taxpayer, which is the trader? The guy who's the average person, the average taxpayer in this country, can he afford that? It's not a case of the money not being in the market. If we're a cash-rich economy, we're an insular economy, we're not dependent on credit, and that's the beauty of our market. That's why Pakistan doesn't. If you see what happened during the recession in 2008, nothing happened to Pakistan. If you see what happened during the COVID-19 recession,
because of the grey area of economy,
it's primarily because we're not documented,
yeah,
and that's where the cash is, and that's what people don't realize, that Pakistan is a very rich country as a whole. But the world, and exactly what he talked about.
So that means that our GDP, in fact, is not around 300 billion, sir. It has to be much more.
It's much more than that. If you look at, the government said that we're looking at about 4% GDP growth. I'm telling you, we're
that is the documented GDP.
Unofficially, I'm telling you, we're going to go well above 5% if we're actually looking at the Pakistan scenario as of now. So there's a lot to be done. I'll give another example in terms of our regulations. If you look at our import-export, and we're again talking about policy. Currently, the mechanism for a container to be cleared in Pakistan takes about 216 days. 216 hours, sorry. 216 hours is a significant amount of time. If you compare that with South Korea, they take about 7 hours to clear a container. Now, if you compare on the same time with regards to exports, it takes us, again, over 113 hours to export that container, whereas South Korea takes about 14 hours at max. If you look at India in the middle of it, they're about 85 hours. So we're way off in terms of cost and in terms of time, and time is everything. So imagine if I'm doing a project, I need my materials to come in from my hotel or from my apartment building. It'll take nearly a week for it to come from Karachi, but over a month for it to be cleared.
And then on top, the inventory cost would also be added to it.
Obviously, the fact that it's getting delayed, I'm going to pay for the delay that is sitting at the port. How is that justified? Time is money, and they don't realize that. It's all about the policies and procedures.
It's about the attitude also, Sadasa, because generally, I mean, it's, the attitude is very slow and lethargic, unfortunately, sir. Not only physically, but mentally also. Now, Durrani Saab, one important area. And since we were talking about that, and you were talking about the privatization also. So productivity basically means that at least you should be making something comparatively more than the break-even point, so that you're into the profit zone. So over here, there are so many industries which went bankrupt. There were so many sick units earlier, since Sadasa was talking about these small and medium enterprises, and I believe that is the backbone. That's the key for any country, sir. Look at Japan, look at Holland. I mean, you name any country, and Germany, Denmark even. Sir, in Pakistan, the kind of opportunities those exist in Punjab or in Sindh and even KP. So we haven't been able to capitalize on those fronts. It's a very clear-cut, unfortunate part. Now, so whenever we talk about investment, we always think, well, the Saudi government is going to pour in $10 billion and they will make this oil refinery. Okay, that is the investment we are talking about. Do you think like investments like 10 million, 20 million in the SME sector would really improve their productivity? You can have certain reforms in place and you can pick up so many small industries, sir. And I mean, these were your export. I mean, a football factory doesn't mean that it is as big as a football field. These are small places, rooms rather. So the sports goods. So is the case with the surgical items. So the case is with the carpet industry, your leather industry. I mean, Durrani Saab, there's a long list I can give you. Your take, sir.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to handle this in a few parts because I think that first and foremost, let's be very clear. Let's start with the interest rate and the impact on your question, right?
Please.
So effectively right now, if I was at the State Bank, I'd raise the interest rates to at least the inflation level, because otherwise you're effectively giving off money at negative rates to the rest of the people. Now, who accesses this? I mean, Sardar pointed out very rightly, the access to this capital, so-called, which we manage, is really a balancing game. And I think KHAQAN should be able to answer this way better than me, because he actually has sat at the center of this. Is basically what they're really trying to do is say, okay, we're not going to raise it to inflation rates. We are going to still allow for some local access, because otherwise what they're doing is the negative access, interest rates effectively, plus the subsidy to the traditional industry, export industry, is what is keeping this industry from innovation. Okay, so that's period. It's those 30 states in Pakistan, the 34 families who you always call for advice. I'm sorry, but it's time to kick each and every one of them out the window. I mean, there are a lot of them they know me, I'm their friend, but I have to tell them they've got to take a step back and let the real people come in and take charge of what needs to be done.
Let's not hijack the system,
okay.
yeah.
Number two, so the large state footprint, very rightly pointed out, we had a plan to follow Tamsek Holdings. We never ended up doing that. Between the sunk cost and the sludge, you should do the sludge series that PIDE is actually doing these days, which really talks about what KHAQAN was talking, what Sardar was talking about, the number of days it takes to do things. So that's what we're scoring the sludge. Now, effectively, 300 plus state-owned enterprises, I have been promoting this, and so have a lot of my friends, that effectively if you just keep paying them and tell them to just sit home, the sludge goes away. Because the thing is, if you do the sunk cost analysis on this, so for example, I suggested this on railways. So some great people came back to me, and I think Dr. Ishad Hussain is very much privy to this, and they said, you know, there is human dignity. I said, my dear fellows, if I had dignity and I knew I was doing nothing rather than creating obstacles in markets, right, I would have be dignity enough.
I was a part of the problem rather than a part of the solution.
If my dignity level is that, then I might as well sit home and get paid, and I can do whatever business. We can give them a carte blanche. Believe me, sending all these people home and keep paying them till they pass out based on actuarial outputs and
things will get better.
No, honestly, this is the fact of life, and we all know it. If we take that dignity, political economy clause out of it, because there ain't no dignity in feeding 10 families and letting 1,000 families go berserk.
Yeah.
And to your question, now remember that you were talking about what is our take on the local SMEs and competitiveness. I think that my last point, and I want to make that rather, look, the debate on green revolution is out the window. And I agree with KHAQAN. And KHAQAN, it's not just increasing yields. That's not the focus. The focus should be innovative agriculture. We need to reduce our agrarian footprint, produce 5 times more from lesser land, and reduce extraction of natural resources, otherwise we're going to be dead.
So the formula used by the government, I mean, they say we'll give you subsidies,
that's
absolutely
we'll give
you urea, free, and it doesn't, I mean, the trickle-down effect isn't there, by the way.
I've just come back from the field, right? Let me give you 2 examples. KP government is saying go do trout fishing, right?
Okay.
When you set up a trout farm, and now they're saying we're giving out credit. So without any planning, without anything, they're saying, come on, babies, let's give you 20 lakh rupees, 25 lakh rupees to set on and develop trout farms. Now, when you set up a trout farm, I visited one in Bamburet just 2 weeks ago. They have effluents. These trouts, when you breed them between the 3 ponds, they send out effluents. Where are these effluents being thrown out? Because the government thinks everybody can do it and glacial water is present, they're going to let everybody. They're all throwing it down into our clean water and our clean groundwater. Now, 60% of Pakistan's water comes from the north. right? This is the third largest ice deposit in the world.
Correct.
The moment we lose it at our current extraction rate, you've read Pakistan economy running dry, 2002 John Briscoe and Usman Qamar, I think this is still a very telling report. And so this is another second example of this over extraction. Agriculture. We are going to give the Kisans and the locals, everybody. Nobody has done a farm size analysis on who cultivates on whose land. That's number one. Number two, by just spreading credit and letting traditional agriculture flourish, you're going to over extract your land, both in terms of nutrients, both in terms of the energy spent on a farm, and third, in terms of the water that you're going to get pump out of your natural aquifers. So where are we heading? I sometimes really think that the training given to every incoming bureaucrat, I'm sorry, I do
No, be yourself, sir.
Yeah, I do
on
teach
so many
at both
issues,
NIPS and the NCPS. I mean, the whole issue is that I think, look at what we're doing at COP26. We're going there begging for more money. Instead of having an adaptation strategy, we're asking for more. We'll give this, you give us this. Because we inherit from government to government this mentality, the person who brings in more loans to hand over a larger debt portfolio, who cares about what we leave for our children, right? So you were talking of Denmark. That's the fundamental shift in attitude, that they are really worried about what are they leaving their children, from the macro balance to the micro balance in the soil. That's where you are.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, look at Norway for that matter, sir. Look at their fishing industry. Look at the amount of energy they produce through water, the hydel projects. Look at their shipping for that matter. Now tourism is really picking up. Plus, on top, God was kind, they have enough oil. So from a poorer country as compared to the rest of the Scandinavian, it has become the rich most. Simple as that. So another important area, sir, since you've mentioned a couple of very important points here, Durrani Saab, and I want that debate to go to Dr. KHAQAN Saab. Dr. Saab, couple of points here. One is about definitely what needs to be done. Have we ever done our own SWOT analysis that, this is 2021, this is not 1921, we have to get out of that mindset? Currently, the kind of problems that are being faced externally, internally, look at the population growth, look at the kind of productivity we're having. Well, there are certain external macro environmental factors which are beyond your control, but at least you can look after the micro level issues that exist inside your borders. Now, for example, sir, energy cost, that has given a good beating to our overall economy, sir, during the last 10 years or so. There wasn't any energy, forget about the cost of it. Law and order situation, whenever I used to ask any question, sir, to any person related to the finance and business in Pakistan, they would say, well, the law and order situation is that the foreign investment is not pouring in because the investor is reluctant. Now, sir, when we talk about the domestic investor, he is in fact moving out of Pakistan. So when this is taking place, the brain drain is taking place, the flight of capital is taking place, I mean, it doesn't make sense that we should ask the other people to come into it. So leave that for a moment. But don't you think, sir, this is the job of the private sector, not the government? The government should be there to make policies and to regulate to a certain extent. But this is the job. The government job is not to do business, but to provide a conducive environment to do business, sir. And there seems to be a total conflict of interest here, sir. Is that the problem?
So SMEs are a very important part of your economy. Again, let's put some numbers. So 5.2 million commercial and industrial establishments in the country, 99% of those are classified as SMEs. That is primarily your domestic sector. That is primarily where productivity growth will come from. That is primarily where growth in jobs will come from. The issue of finance is a small part of it, but then the real issue is the technological upgrade. The real issue is scaling up of these SMEs. Then these are the SMEs which will also get you in partnerships the foreign investment that we are looking for as well. So there is no denying that that is what we should be doing. I've heard that an SME framework, I don't like to call it policy or a action matrix, has been on the cards for some time, and in the next a few weeks we are going to see some kind of framework coming, as you said, doing policy on our own from the government in the coming weeks. So that should be a pleasant way forward. Number two, we must realize that reducing the government footprint by letting off the SOEs that we keep retaining, and I think the best place to start is Pakistan's energy sector. The 9 discos we have, the many gencos we have, the new 4 LNG power plants we have will create not only an energy market, but will also let some efficiency in them. And one of the reasons we are not able to regulate the energy sector is because we are regulating the public sector. The regulator finds it very hard to regulate the public sector. Once we have some kind of private sector input there, I am hoping that the regulation will also become better. If that happens, the government will also have more time, more energy, more social capital to contribute to making more policy related decisions, whether that's going green, whether that's doing a proper analysis of how an ESG framework can be created in the country, rather than just running discos day on and day out and not being able to do the kind of efficiency things that the private sector can do in terms of hiring and firing. I think Pakistan's perennial issue now is competency. I rate competency as one of the 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 major issues that we must solve. And here I don't talk of big reforms that we can reform the whole of the executive and move forward. I think small areas where we can bring some quality management, as people want on the other side also, where there is a lot of interaction with the private sector, some technical help where in areas like energy, finance, where you have to deal with the external IMF. And let me so I think that is the way to move, rather than thinking on some very big, huge reform that would happen. In the meantime, we can keep doing that reform as well. On the regulatory guillotine, my sense is that yes, we can keep doing this kind of work to reduce the number of time and the number of procedures and the costs. But where we stand today, the scale and quality of work that we do will really determine if we can compete with the world or not. I think a big regulatory effort should be something like where we can do away, and we do away with a major chunk, and then redecide that do we need any regulation there, rather than trying to manipulate the current one. And we can then have a self-assessment mechanism. So in the lower risk areas, we should do a large scale regulatory effort. Similarly, doing one-stop shop is there. That's a good effort. We have gone online in terms of FPR. That is good. We are reducing the number of sales tax that the companies have to file. That is a good effort. We are doing VBOC, which will also help on the customs side. So we have that. But of course, the scale and quality really needs to go heavy. I keep coming back to the agriculture sector, and I completely agree with what Amir has said, and we need to move in that direction and in that way, because we were importing only lentils and palm oil. Now you're importing cotton, you're importing wheat, you're importing sugarcane.
Everything exactly in which.
And with the kind of devaluation you have had to do on the rupee, of course, the pass-through effect is tremendous, as the pass-through effect has been tremendous on the energy side. So we must realize that. And a big nation of 220 million people, we cannot let go of agriculture and do all the
obviously,
things.
Obviously, sir, that I mean, but the way it's shrinking, I mean, it's alarming. Population is just multiplying like anything, sir. And when you talk about agriculture, I mean, it used to be, I remember 28%, now it has gone down to 23% as far as GDP is concerned, sir, if not more, I guess. Now, sir, I'll just have, sir, a couple of minutes, and I want to engage the gentleman in the studio. Sir, quick comment on a very important point, sir. We always used to talk about value addition. So let's keep value addition on one side, sir. That has been the problem. Wish we had learned in 80s and 90s, things would have been different. But it's a product diversification now. Sardar Sahab, still same pattern, same market. European Union, USA, most of your exports, value-added exports, like they're cotton-based. Cotton that you're importing, interestingly. And you haven't been able to compete internationally, sir, because the product quality as far as Bangladesh is concerned, that's amazing, unbelievable. No match, latest machinery, good training, best productivity. What else do you need? The issue now, that is about the product diversification. I said so because I believe, sir, this is 2021. You need to look into so many other aspects. I'll just give you one quick example, then I want both of you to answer this. Sir, I was looking at the advertisement of India and Pakistan on these cricket, during this Cricket World Cup. So most of these Indian advertisement was about the applications, high-tech, apps, and apps. This is what the future, so they are so future-oriented, they can see where we are all moving. So they understand, they have developed that. So we are still stuck in Coke. Oh, we see Coke and Pepsi is different, but what I'm saying is that the basic products, you know, because the winter is coming, so some you know, advertisement of these sweaters or some shirts or something of that sort. Very basic. That used to be in 20, 30, 40 years ago, sir. Not competing. I mean, put on CNN, how many times would you see such ads, sir? Don't you think we need to get market-oriented now, sir?
Demand-driven. You know what's missing is, again, it's not the fact that we don't have innovation, we don't lack innovation. Innovation is there. It's just the right policies, which is what's required. India's currently, we talked about apps, they're currently exporting $136 billion worth of software annually, and we're hardly touching about $2 billion. And look, the Prime Minister is touching on every single sector that he's promised. He's trying to create employment with the Economy of Durrani program. He's trying to address the housing with the 5 million houses, the tree plantation to address the climate change issues. He's going one step at a time, but you've got to understand he's taking charge of a sinking ship. And it's more or less like a one-man show. He's got the vision, he's patriotic, he's a visionary, he's sincere with the country, but then again, it's just one man. We need more people like him, we need more people like him.
The captain of the ship is the right man.
He is the right man, he's taking the ship in the right direction, but then again, he's driving the ship. What about the people who are going to save it from sinking? We need a whole crew there, and I think everyone's doing whatever they can within the capacity. Look, with regards to value addition and transfer of technology, that's required. At the same time, when we're talking about Pakistan, the perception has to change. We are a market which is open for business. We're not that bad as far as ease of doing. Back in 2007, 2006, our ease of doing business international ratings were about 77. If you look at it now, according to BOI, we're close to about 140, which is not that off. I mean, we're getting back in the right direction, but people need to give us an opportunity. The negative propaganda against Pakistan needs to stop. There's a lot of potential with regards to what we have to offer. With regards to, look, I'll give you another example. We took a delegation all the way out to Turbat. We're looking at 40% of Pakistan's land, 880,000 square kilometers in total. Out of that 40%, it's a lot of area we're talking about. We're bigger than most of Europe. Put aside in terms of population and landmass. So imagine how much potential there is in terms of tourism, in terms of agriculture. Turbat and Gwadar is currently offering 21 years tax holiday. They're giving you a single-digit tariff rate for any company looking to set up shop there. I mean, imagine the incentive you're going to get if you set up a new factory.
So if I'm not safe there, no matter you give me 100%
rate
of return,
that's changed.
Or you give me a free land and you give me all the money to construct a building and do business, I will not do it.
If there's a 3-star sitting there, I promise you it's a very safe environment. I went there with a delegation of over 40 people. We chartered the whole aircraft, went ourselves, despite what was being said, to prove and break the status quo that we're not safe. I mean, we went all the way from the north. We didn't ask anyone from Karachi to come. We went from here to explore business opportunities. That place is so rich in terms of minerals, it's unexplored.
Then again, the question is about the perception.
Iran is selling Iranian products in Pakistani areas. That's an embarrassment for people like us who are sitting in Pakistan, and another country is benefiting by we're selling in our country.
Good enough, they're smart.
We need to explore our own country, look at all the avenues that there are, get rid of this perception that Pakistan is, it's not, I'm telling you, it is more than safe. For foreigners, it is more than safe. Look what happened with regards to the ambassador from the UK. He came himself on national TV and said, you know what, I'm sorry about the team going back, but I'm perfectly safe here. I'm perfectly content with regards to the security measures. This is just perception, whatever it may have been. We ourselves as Pakistanis need to take ownership and say to the world that, guys, we're open for business. We're as good as you are, and we're more inexpensive. We have cheaper labor than Bangladesh.
You have to market yourself. You need to be a good salesperson, sir.
Exactly.
Simple as that. Now, last comment from you, Durrani Sahib, and that is about no matter what the British High Commissioner says, at the end of the day, what we hear in the news, what we read in the papers, what we see on various platforms of social media, that in fact hits our subconscious, and that is where the entire planning is being done, and that creates the perception. Simple as that, sir. That is not an easy task. it will take a lot of time. If it has taken about 20-25 years to take Pakistan from one point to point B, say from point B to point C, it is going to perhaps take another 2 decades or so. Yes, we do understand, but sir, the kind of environment, I'm talking about the macro environmental factors which are really pushing Pakistan, cornering Pakistan, FATF, for example, one issue. Every other time, oh well, the terrorists from Pakistan came into the Indian, we call it the Indian illegally occupied Kashmir, they will say that in Jammu or something like that. You know, when that kind of news, I mean, that is aired, obviously, sir, Pakistan is considered in a very different, you know, philosophy. And then on top, then when we claim, oh well, you come to, you know, this area and we're going to give you a free place and whatever, and suddenly there's a bomb blast in the same, and nobody knows the demographics of Pakistan and the area and everything. But sir, that scares people, and this is where the problem is, and we haven't been able to address it, or perhaps if we are able, whatever formula they're applying, it's not working well.
No, so actually I will quote a translation of Bulle Shah, which I don't want to say in Punjabi right now, but actually it translates to, you know, you run to the mosque, you run to the temple, but you never run into yourself and introspect and see where am I failing. So we have failed ourselves. This is tomfoolery that we have everything, we have skills, we have this. I have to second KHAQAN on this. Where are our core competencies? I have now, every time I come on television, I say every month I look at 300 applicants. I have yet to build a core team of 10 people, which can do for me what my industry in services needs to be done. And that is
human capital, sir.
Human capital is at a loss. We are creating university after university which is of no use. And I would rather have done with 5 universities that are really top notch than creating 5,000.
You know what that reminds me of? Brick in the wall, Pink Floyd.
Yeah, yeah. So the other 2 last points on you is that tax, you know, to be very honest, this diversification. So the point that you made, and I think the point everyone is alluding to, diversification again, absence of competencies, but then where is the capital going? So you very rightly said, when we were growing up in the 70s, the ads was Cherry Blossom, Shoe Polish, Pakistan, Mitchell's, Bianca toothpaste, you know, everything made in Pakistan, right? Even the Cherokee Jeep that we were doing was at the, well, forget the name, National Motors or whatever, was being assembled and parts manufactured here. What have we done? Sorry to say, diddly doodle. Quickly.
Sir, I'll have to cut you, sir, because we were just told that the Prime Minister is coming in live, sir. But anyway, thank you so much for your time. Pleasure having you, Sardar Sahab. And thank you so much, Dr. Sahab, for your time. And that's all we have for this up. I'll see you, inshallah, on Monday. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz and have a great weekend.